we had raised $30 million. We set down a day to call in that commitment, and that was September 12th of 2001. And with September 11th, there was no money left.
Bryan has built companies in industries most people would never touch, from aviation and oil and gas to AI and housing. Today, we are exploring the mindset behind making big bets when there is no guarantee they'll work. Bryan, welcome to Behind Numbers.
Thank you. It's good to be here. So,
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I'm going to start from that airline thing because tell me if I'm wrong, but you started it at 27. And generally, at 27, most people are trying to get promoted. So, what made you think I'm going to start an airline?
I always say that the airline is my biggest business failure as well as my biggest business success. So at 27, I was building a little law practice. I had already come out of a very interesting situation where I went directly out of law school. It was a little law practice between me and a classmate of mine, and we were just doing entrepreneurial law. And I had a friend come to me and said, "Hey, I have this business plan and I want to do an airline. This would be so great." And the great thing about at that time, and most throughout my career, I can literally go from billing a client and take off that hat and put on my entrepreneur hat and just do that. So I was like, "Hey, great, I'm in." We brought a couple other guys. So there was really the management team. There were 4 of us. And so I was the oldest at 27. And we were so naive. We had no idea what we were doing. So the idea was we need a critical mass. We probably need $30 million is the number we came up with. It wouldn't do any good to have $1 million, as much as that was great. That wouldn't even lease us one plane and get us started. So we thought, well, 30 million, that's a good critical mass to get us started. And we just ran around. We just tried to get anybody to sign on with a commitment. And we hit that date, that commitment. We had raised $30 million. And with September 11th, there was not a plane in the sky, but we still met on September 12th. We had brought in a guy named Henry Autry, one of my dear friends. Henry was going to be our CEO. He still came on September 12th. We met in my office and we kind of scratched our heads and said, "Now what? What do we do?" And he said, "Well, why don't you guys figure it out and call me when you got some money?" And I remember sitting there, and one of the other members of this team, he just kind of hung around and said, "Hey, I've always wanted to do oil and gas. So why don't we try that?"
Okay. But before going there,
Yeah.
you actually mentioned it was the biggest failure and the most successful thing that you have ever done. Why do you think that one was the most successful thing, or one of the things that you have done that maybe changed also the course of what you were going to do afterwards?
So it is interesting. I think we had a different model because at that time, most small airports and small airlines, particularly flying out of small airports, they were closing a lot. The smaller airports did not have commercial traffic. I think we saw something there that every time I go to Provo now, I love flying out of Provo Airport because I go down there and I kind of feel like this. I did this a little bit. Obviously, I didn't, but I feel like, hey, I saw this coming. I had the vision for this. We knew that it was going to work. We knew we had a business model that others really have replicated since then, and it's worked. And so I guess when I think of successes, obviously I didn't make a dollar from it. I didn't get anything out of it, but I got a lot of experience and a great network and some people that I really love and will cherish for all my life that taught me some great things from doing that. That was literally, there's probably no other startup or other idea in my career or anything that I've seen, whether I've done or clients have done, that is as big in scale as to try and start an airline from absolute zero. We didn't, we weren't travel agents or something. We didn't know anything about it. We'd been on airplanes. And so that's about it. That's what we knew. And
After that, you started again something that it was not that easy. I mean, an oil and gas company.
yeah, it was, the interesting thing is when this friend of mine, Danny Gunnell is his name, Danny, when he said, I've always wanted to do an oil and gas company, we said, oh, let's try that. So our plan was we will start calling oil and gas company presidents, executives. And so that's what we did. We didn't really have a plan besides that. We'll just call people. So we would call them. And if we could get somebody on the phone, if we would break through to somebody, they'd say, well, do you want a job? We're like, no. We're not looking for a job. We don't want you to hire us. Okay. So do you have any money to invest? No. We're just, no, we don't. We're a bunch of kids still. And I still feel like a kid, but we're like, no, we don't have money to invest. And they're like, most of them, if they would stay on that long, they'd just be like, okay, thanks. We'll get back to you or something. We did find a couple people that were like, hey, I love your enthusiasm. I love this. Frankly, it was those that agreed to work with us were hoping to harness us, like, more than anything. They were like, hey, I could use you. You could just start pounding on doors and raising some money. And what we did is initially we bought small pieces of oil and gas projects. We'd get friends and family money and we'd say, hey, we'll go do this. We had no technical background, no geologist, no geophysicist, no engineer. We didn't know what we were doing. We just were like, hey, here's a deal. Do you want to buy a little bit of it? And so I tell people a lot of times we could have been selling oil and gas investments. We could have been selling wigs. I probably need one of those. So we could have been selling anything, insurance, but we were selling oil and gas investments. So we just started going from there. So,
And I'm curious because I brought some startups and some founders here to this podcast. And generally, they're always stating the same thing. If you want to open your first startup, if you want to be a founder, start with something that is easy. Start with something that you know really well, so that then you can start learning there and then get inside things that are more complex, things that are bigger. You started from the opposite.
yeah, I go into most things backwards anyway. So but yeah, in a way I've done that because what I always rely on is I have an amazing legal education from BYU Law School. I have an amazing legal background, but use that legal expertise to think outside of legal. So as most attorneys, if you are just the legal officer, you're looking for risks, you're looking for things that could stop the venture. And I do things a little bit different. As a legal officer, I am looking for what I can do with my legal background, with my experience, with my education to make it work instead of how do we kill something? How do we make it work? The easy part is that I can plug in on a legal side and use that to create an opportunity.
And you have just spoken about risks. What is the biggest risk that you have ever taken that maybe kept you awake at night?
I think the one that certainly kept me awake at night was a venture that was called Moonbeams and Cabin Dreams. And this is one that doesn't show up anywhere on my LinkedIn or my resume because it did not quite work. But again, with a couple friends, we were going to build out kind of a design studio. And the biggest risk and the biggest reason why it kept me up at night is I ended up personally signing on all kinds of things. And my wife didn't know. So there's my biggest risk is don't do stuff that your wife doesn't know about. And especially when she's your absolute rock and she's my support system and she would do anything, but she's also my anchor in that. She makes me think of things that I wouldn't. I get pretty starry-eyed and it's all going to work. Just like walking into Utah Valley Entrepreneurial Forum and thinking I would walk out with millions of dollars of checks. Sometimes I get thinking too much like that. So I thought Moonbeams would just work. I signed on the lease. I signed on some credit cards. I signed on some lines of credit, different things. And it just never quite materialized like we thought. But I do think going to risk, I think the biggest risk that anybody can have, in my opinion, and I'll tell my kids this, even my 13-year-olds up to anybody, is a single source of income. Having a single source of income is your biggest risk. You've got to have other ways, other investments, other opportunities.
Especially in the market that we are right now, you need to have multiple sources of income so that if one source is going to go to zero, you will still have other ones that are actually
Yeah.
up and running. And
Yeah.
going back for a second to what you mentioned about maybe you will start a company and maybe it is not going anywhere. And then someone else is going to start it and it is going to just go to the moon. But I was curious that you have worked with hundreds and spoken with hundreds of founders and executives. What's a trait that the best leaders have that nobody talks about?
I don't know. I don't know if nobody talks about it, but for sure, the difference between a success and a failure in business most of the time is perseverance. And it's just that one moment that you stopped just too soon, that it was there, you were there and you built it up. And then you had to go take another job. You have to feed your family. You have to do things like that, or you just don't know when that success is going to come and you stop just short of it. So having a runway, the biggest thing I see with entrepreneurs is having that runway or knowing what their runway is. If as a lot of my law school classmates came out and they bought the big house and they bought the Mercedes and BMWs and different things like that, they didn't have a lot of runway. They were kind of stuck in what they were doing. So that's a big thing that I think nobody talks about. The one thing that nobody does dare say, and I'll say, is you got to marry well. Honestly, if you have your support system, if you marry somebody who will support you in being an entrepreneur and going after these things, and hold you down sometimes and say, no, you can't float away and try that. That's the biggest thing, has been kind of key to my success.
Which is the thing that you are most proud of?
Wow. I think I've got to say it's probably the, my kids and the things that they are learning and how they're growing. And my oldest is about to finish law school. He's at the University of Houston Law Center. He'll be done in a couple months. And what he's already accomplishing, my 22-year-old, the things that he's doing, it's 100% it goes to family. I can't think of anything business-wise that I think, oh, that would replace it. It's just what the decisions they're making and the things that they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bryan, we're always closing the podcast with one question.
Okay.
So you could go back and change just one thing. It could be a decision, it could be a mindset, or even something that you wish you would have known. What would it be and why?
It is interesting. I'll think about, I need to think about that because I've had this question before and I've always said nothing. I mean, the mistakes I've made, and I've made plenty of mistakes. I tell my baseball team, we either win or we learn. So I haven't won every time, but I've tried to learn. thinking about moonbeams and cabin dreams, that's probably the biggest regret. If I had to, or if I could, I'd go back and I would say, I need to sit down and I need to ask my wife, we need to go through this. She needs to be 100% on board instead of putting her in a position where it was a risk for my family, risk for her, because I don't mind taking the risks, but I don't want to put my family, I don't want to put her at risk. I think that would be, don't get out over your skis, out over your support system. If I make mistakes on stuff that I didn't get her support on, or then I'm in trouble.
I hear you. I hear you. But going back to the mistakes and the learning, had one founder here on the podcast that once she told me, I don't see those as mistakes. I actually do see those as layers of my learning. And so I can do what I'm doing right now for thanks to all those layers that I built throughout all my past. Making those mistakes, it is really what makes you who you are right now, and what then is going to help you afterwards in anything else that you have done.
Boy, my one regret, I should have gone back to Italy sooner. So it took me 30 years, 30 plus years to get back to Italy. I should have gone back there earlier.
Well, now you should go there every single year. So,
See,
but Bryan, first, thank you so much for sharing your journey so openly with us today. It has been a real pleasure to have you on Behind Numbers.
it's been great. Thank you.
And to everyone else listening, thank you for joining us. If you have enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow Behind Numbers for more stories from leaders shaping the future of business and finance. I am Alessandro Cozzi. See you next time.